Bart Teeter, Director of Fleet and Operational Safety. Welcome to my podcast, AT Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. I'd like to dive into who you are and what you do. Start with a little bit of your background with the Texas Highway Patrol and how that evolved into working for autonomous trucking.
Yeah, perfect. First, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always great to come on and talk about what we do, and but also, especially locally. This is home to me, of course. So I really appreciate the chance to come on and talk about what we're doing at Bot Auto and in the autonomous vehicle space. But I started with the Highway Patrol. I did 26 years. Started in 1998. Worked through the end of 2024. Most of my time in the Highway Patrol, I was in commercial vehicle enforcement. That is, we're the folks. We started out when I was a young trooper getting involved. We were called the license and weight, service, and then later became commercial vehicle enforcement. And we were the folks here in Texas charged with enforcing the rules and the regulations on the trucking industry, whether that is size and weight rules, making sure they're not overweight, logbooks, making sure they're not driving beyond their hours of service, have the proper license, and also equipment safety. And of course our goal with that was to we have a crash problem in America, and we have a crash problem in Texas, where nationwide we kill about 40,000 people a year in traffic crashes.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, it's a big number. It's a staggering number, and that number just kind of holds steady. And unfortunately, we lead the nation in Texas when you look at commercial vehicle crashes and fatalities. We've always we've got a lot of trucks. We've got a lot of trucks in fields such as construction and energy production, where they're operating in dangerous conditions. And
would you attribute that high fatality rate to maybe negligent driving or too much driving, a tired driver? I
mean, first of all, we have to start with, when we look at the causation of a lot of our commercial vehicle crashes, they are, if I go out today in my personal car and run into the back of a commercial vehicle and kill myself, that's a commercial vehicle crash fatality. So we don't ever want to paint this as, we've got some problems within the trucking industry in Texas, but we also, it's people operating around those trucks. And so, yeah, we have that problem. And so as I continued through my career, working here in the San Angelo area, spent a great deal of my career in Midland, Odessa, as I promoted to sergeant and then lieutenant, was out there quite a bit of the time, right in the middle of oil and gas production, and a lot of those crash problems. You think of places, there were times back when I was out there in 2012 and 2013 when school districts like the San Angelo Independent School District wouldn't send their buses up 158 to go to Midland and Odessa. They would go to Big Spring and take the interstate, because 158 was 2 lanes at the time. It was so dangerous that we were just having that big of a problem. And so I worked my way up through there, always trying, and I think we did and we continue in the Texas Highway Patrol and law enforcement in general. Our local police departments and sheriff's office do a great job, and they are holding the line, but we certainly have never turned the tide on this crash and fatality problem, and so continued to do it. And as I continued, I eventually made captain, spent a little time in Fort Worth, and then went to the headquarters in Austin, where I was helping to run our commercial vehicle enforcement program. And again, looking at that data daily was my job of what can we do. And about that time, I was asked, hey, would you start? My boss at the time asked me, would you start going and talking to these? We've got a lot of, autonomous truck developers coming to Texas.
About what time was this? What time frame?
So I got to Austin in about 2021.
Okay.
And early 2021, and that's when but I had already been kind of talking that I'd been asked before full just level 4 autonomy. We talked a little bit about platooning out in West Texas, where that's one truck will be driven and then another truck or 2 trucks might follow along in rapid succession. So already having some of those discussions. And while I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as a captain, having those conversations with some of the autonomous vehicle developers up there, And then I moved to Austin, and I inherited a seat on the Texas Connected and Automated Vehicle Task Force, which is TxDOT, is kind of the parent agency of that. But TxDOT, DPS, DMV, a lot of private folks are involved. And this was a task force set up with, at the direction of Governor Abbott back in about 2017,
Okay.
as all these developers started coming to Texas. When we passed our first autonomous vehicle rules and regulations in Texas, allowing autonomous trucks and autonomous vehicles in general in Texas.
So the state of Texas was already passing laws.
Right.
Okay.
So we had hey, get together and talk about how we do this responsibly. And so I chaired a subcommittee on safety and sat on several other subcommittees on that CAV task force through TxDOT. So I became more and more involved. And I ultimately and I think more lack of just anybody else doing it anywhere in the country at the level we were, kind of became one of the leading voices for first responder interaction with automated vehicles. So I ended up traveling quite a bit, going to a lot of conferences and things, speaking to our experience here in Texas, talking about how we were doing this, what we were building here. And so ultimately, you work somewhere long enough, you get to the point where retirement makes sense. And
Okay.
retirement made sense for me. And because I had become so kind of immersed in this entire automated vehicle development here in Texas and rollout, it was kind of a natural transition to go to work for somebody that was doing that. And
Okay.
so I did. I went to work for Bart Auto, who was at the time a brand new company. Now I've been there a little over a year and a half. We're about 2.5 years old.
So Bart, one of my questions was going to be, how did you transition from Texas Highway Patrol to autonomous vehicle? But you had a very smooth transition. It wasn't, Highway Patrol for 20-something plus years, retire, and then you decided to get into autonomous trucking.
I knew where I
autonomous
was
vehicles.
going.
Okay, so you already had a pathway there.
Well, yes. And so, what happened the last couple of years I'm working, I start having conversations with people like, hey, how close are you to being able to retire? And, can we talk about, potentially once you retire coming? And so, no, it was a very natural transition. I knew everybody in the space,
Okay.
and it was a good, easy transition.
So
for
did
me.
you seek out an employer in the field, or were you maybe recruited into the company you work for now?
I tell people all the time, when you tell me, oh, you find out I retired from DPS, that's what they've known me as for a long time. Oh, did you finally get tired of it? And the answer was no. I was really happy where I was doing what I was doing. But I was, also, like I said, I had the time. It made sense from a financial standpoint and a career standpoint to retire. And again, I had several companies approach me about potentially coming to work for them. And ultimately, I settled on Bart Auto because I thought they were the right fit.
Okay, so now that you've been with Bart Auto for
a year and a half, I started in November of 24.
Okay, and tell me what your day-to-day job looks like. What are you doing? Are you out there inspecting trucks? Are you building trucks? Are you selling the trucks? What is your responsibility?
So it's interesting. So again, we're a 2.5-year-old kind of, we're a trucking company. I tell people I don't know if we're a trucking company masquerading as a tech startup or a tech startup, kind of, doing double duty as a trucking company, because we're both, right? We are out there every day running trucks on the road, hauling freight, but we're also building this amazing product. And so, coming to work, I remember when my boss, my current boss, sent me the job description when we were talking about me coming to work for Bart, and it was, we looked at it. We'd already talked about it, so there was no surprises. But I looked at it and he said, "Well, this is kind of 3 job descriptions, right? One, getting out there. I go out and I interact with our first responder communities.
Okay.
We want them to understand not that this is coming, but this is here, and this is how you interact with us safely. And if you have to interact with us, here's some things you might want to know to make you more comfortable. Here's how you get a hold of us. So we have that first responder interaction piece.
So your trucks are on the road today?
They are.
Okay. Across the state of Texas, interstate, cross states?
Most of our trucks are operating in Texas, and I got to clarify that our trucks aren't operating they're operating autonomously in a lot of cases, but we still have a safety driver sitting behind the seat. And we'll talk here in a little bit about. We have had some demonstrations, some milestones, but our trucks are driving themselves. But we keep that driver in there, just until we are 100% sure, and we have those conversations with our enforcement partners and our regulatory partners, and everybody is comfortable. And then we think about pulling a driver. So we're operating pretty much within the Texas Triangle. We're Houston to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Not a whole lot going up towards Austin yet, or going up that leg of the triangle. We do now have a regular trip we're making. We're going all the way to Phoenix. Now those are human-driven runs right now, but we're building our freight network out to be ready for our autonomous freight network.
Now you mentioned you're talking to first responders, police, others, helping them understand what to expect, how to interact with these autonomous vehicles. But right now you have safety drivers in these vehicles. So
correct.
If a Texas Highway Patrol stops a vehicle, there is somebody there. But one day, I would imagine, there will not be a safety driver in the vehicle. Is that correct?
That's the ultimate plan, and that's not just a plan. We've made that happen. About a month ago, we set off from Houston, from our hub location in Houston. It was late in the night. We were managing some weather and some things of that nature. A little after 1 a.m., we sent a truck northbound. Well, first on Beltway 8 down in Houston, and then on I-45, and it drove itself 231 miles to our hub.
Wow.
in the South DFW area, Hutchins specifically, and it drove itself from our hub in Houston to our hub in Hutchins. And there was no human on board, not a safety driver, not someone sitting in the back in the jump seat in case there was a problem. We did this with nobody in the truck. We delivered a load of freight. And per the chipper's parameters, they want this load at midnight, because it's got to deliver at 5 or 6 in the morning, and they were having trouble filling that. They have trouble filling that route with human drivers, and so they're like, "Hey, kids, is this something that makes sense for autonomy?" And we said it absolutely does. And so we've done this one time, and it was a great experience. Go out and look at our website. It generated a lot of great press for us. But that's just the first step. Now the next step is let's go. Let's do this. Let's repeat this regularly.
You got to know I've got so many questions, and I'm going to try to get them all out without forgetting what they are. So, first question: autonomous vehicles. What does that really mean? Is it somebody is remote controlling it from a station somewhere across the state, or is it driving by itself based off of the computing and the inference and everything it might do all by itself? First, lay the foundation here.
So it's driving by itself.
Okay.
So first of all, there's no one remotely operating our vehicles, and to my knowledge, in the AV trucking space, that's just not a thing unless someone's doing something that I haven't heard of, because you just a lot of issues with that, right? If I've got someone trying to remotely operate a truck, even from a couple hundred miles away, you lose signal, or you latency
still got that human error.
Can be a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing is it's operating itself. Now that doesn't mean we're not monitoring it. We don't have people watching it, engineers and safety folks watching what we're doing. We can see what the truck is seeing. Our trucks have 18 high definition cameras that give us a 360 degree view. We've got 8 lidars at short, medium, and long range that create a redundant picture, and then we've got radars that round out that sensor suite. And so as together they create a 360 degree 3D image of the world around us, and by incorporating things like LiDAR and radar, we've got the speeds of approaching vehicles and the departing vehicles. And, we can tell if a truck or a car is going to, we've got right of way at this intersection, but there's no way that car is going to stop. We've calculated that 400 meters possibly down the road, so we can stop, and we can not only help avoid the crashes that we might have caused, but we can avoid the crashes that somebody else might have caused. And so that's the promise of this to me, is how do we, is making the road safer. So yes, we have redundant systems on everything. We've got 2 server racks operating simultaneously but independently.
You have server racks inside the truck?
In the truck, yes.
Wow. Okay.
And again, the truck can operate by itself. Now, obviously, we have eyes on it, and we can make it stop if we decide for some reason that something's wrong. We can push the button and say, pull to the shoulder and stop, or stop right now if something's good. But and then we can release the truck, but we can't make the truck start driving in. The truck makes the decision, right? No one is making, when we talk about the dynamic driving tasks, that are the things that you and I do each day, and that an autonomous driving system does to make a vehicle do what it does. Pushing the gas, pushing the brake, steering input, all those things.
Are there still gas pedals and steering wheels equipped in these trucks?
In our trucks there are, and on the commercial side, you look at it, we buy off the lot from Houston Freightliner. We buy Freightliner Cascadias.
That was another one of my questions is, are you building the trucks to be autonomous, or are you buying trucks and then making them autonomous?
Buying trucks and making them autonomous. We go buy a brand new Houston or Freightliner Cascadia. We bring it in. We strip the entire interior of the truck. We pull the hood. We pull everything off. You start pulling wiring harnesses and putting in the wiring harnesses we're adding the wiring and everything to add our sensor racks, our sensor suite to handle our server racks. We add the controllers, redundant controllers for steering, for acceleration, for braking. We do all that. We add all that to a factory truck. Now, some of our peers in the world, and there are OEMs, there are manufacturers that are developing autonomous ready trucks, and that is, you'll be able to go to your pick your flavor of commercial truck and buy one that is autonomous ready, and that means it comes out and it's already built. So
you don't have to outfit it.
You would still have to bolt on your particular system, but it's designed for that. The wiring should be there. The places to bolt on should be there.
At that level, would they come without the typical human controls? And do you foresee that evolving to that point when it's so time tested that you're never going to need a human?
So when you look at what we're doing, potentially far future. So 2 things. We'll just touch on that with, if you go look in the ride hailing space, the robo taxi space, as we call it, like the Waymos of the world, other companies like Neuro, places like they are building some task specific vehicles that don't really look like cars. You look them up. They're kind of boxy. They look like almost a small train car or subway, commuter train car. They don't necessarily have, they don't necessarily have steering wheels. No, the Waymos are mostly using converted, Jaguar I-Paces around Austin and Phoenix and the places they are. But other companies are leaning into the purpose-built type vehicles for autonomy, and they won't have steering wheels or pedals or brakes, whatever, right? Don't need windshield, don't necessarily need windshield wipers, because the vehicle is seeing from a different
so regardless if it's a torrential downpour, there's nothing, blocking the windshield, do you even need a windshield?
In those cases, probably not. Now, in our case, again, we're going to continue to build out what looks like a standard truck to be autonomous. And for the foreseeable future, that may not always be the case. And I think if you look, in places, other Europe, China, Japan, people may be doing different things, but here, that seems to be the model. And so, because what we're doing is we're operating on that, as I kind of talked about earlier, our hub to hub model, where we're going to drive from one hub to the next. That is, I'm going to leave, someone's going to go pick up this load at the freight forwarder, at the warehouse, wherever. Someone, that is a human driver, is going to pick it up, bring it to our hub. We're going to get there. We're going to push, make sure everything's right. We're going to push the button, and we're going to send that truck right now, say to Dallas.
Okay.
Later, it may be El Paso, it may be Phoenix or Atlanta. That truck's going to get there. It's going to pull into a hub, and someone's going to get in that truck and deliver it to the final mile, wherever that is.
Okay.
5 miles down the road, 50 miles down the road, whatever. We're not trying to own right now the entire, freight ecosystem. We want the middle mile.
Right.
And so having those trucks capable of being driven by a human, that also, if we have a problem where we feel like we need to stop a truck mid-route sometime and send a driver out to recover it, we can do that. Okay. So that's our model now.
You said you would buy a traditional truck, outfit it with all the gear that it needs. I'm assuming that means it's still a diesel truck, right?
It is a diesel truck.
It's not an electric truck. I think when I had conversations with people about autonomous vehicles, they tend to believe or think electric vehicles, but it's still a traditional, old-fashioned big rig.
That's correct, and all of ours are powered by Cummins diesel power. One of the things I think, when I looked at what you sent me when we were talking about big misconceptions, that's one of them. Is people, when we say automated vehicles, people conflate that with electric vehicles, and we're not. We are not even, and that even plays out on I think some places around the country when we're talking to rule makers or lawmakers or regulatory folks. We start talking about automated vehicles and like, oh, but you're going to need charging. And I'm like, no, not the same thing.
Yeah.
We're Class 8 diesel internal combustion engines.
So is there any concern with refilling the truck mid-route, or do you just fill it enough that it's going to make it to its destination, and then a human can refill?
So obviously, as we stretch our lanes, as we start to stretch our legs and make longer lanes, if we're going to operate, right now the vision is, we're all operating in Texas for a couple reasons, right? One, we got great weather, right? We're not dealing with very often sleet and snow and ice and all those things that they get farther north. So we're looking at the southern tier, right? The other reason we're in Texas, obviously, is the governor's office and the legislature and the agencies have made it such a welcoming place for our technology and our development. And so we're here for that reason, but we're in the south for a reason, and that's the weather. As we build this tech out, obviously, we envision a day where we can operate in anything that a human can operate in, but why make it difficult on yourself to start?
Okay.
So we're on the southern tier, right? So you think about that I-10 route, I-20, maybe up to, even I-40 can get some weather, but you start thinking about from I-40 down, and, so you start thinking about, can we ultimately run a route from Port of Jacksonville to the Port of LA? That would be awesome. And in that case, once we do that, obviously having a fuel stop might be a thing, and so then we have to figure that out. So we have to find some kind of a landing spot somewhere where we can pull in, have somebody take over the truck, pull it in, fuel it up, do the safety checks. But the other thing too, when you start looking at those multi-day trips, is we're not going to send a truck out and put it on the road for 2 or 3 days and not look at it just from a safety perspective.
Okay.
A human-driven truck, drivers are required to daily do a pre-trip and a post-trip inspection. We're not exempt necessarily. We're not exempt from those rules. We do some enhanced inspections on our trucks because of what we do, but we still have to meet the regulatory requirements out of the federal regulations that cover trucking. And so we're going to have to do that, right? We're going to have to figure out, and that's the burden on us is, do we build a hub somewhere, or do we partner with a pilot truck stop or a Love's or a Flying J truck stop somewhere, or a TA truck, whatever, right? Yeah. Where we can pull in, and they have contract employees possibly.
They have the facilities and understanding.
And we just pull in, and they fuel us, and we move on. And then when they're done, we relaunch our truck. So yes, those are great questions. We can't do obviously some of the things that a human driver does, and you look at certain industries. You look at our hauling fluids. Obviously, that's a whole different thing that we're not into. Or some, anything that's going to require a driver to get out and attach fittings to load or unload. We're going to have to solve that if we want to do those types of commodities and those types of routes.
Okay, so let's rewind this story just a little bit. Early on, you talked about, or you spoke of, first responders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does your truck know if it's being stopped?
Yes.
Tell me how.
So, interesting, if you go, I encourage people, and I hope it's okay to share, go to our website, bot.auto, or go to YouTube and type in Bot Auto and pull up a lot of the videos that we have out there. We have gone up and spent a lot of time with our friends up at the Texas Transportation Institute at Texas A&M in Bryan College Station. They have at the Relish campus there in Bryan, they have a kind of a test track, and it's set up as a highway type. It's an old airfield, but they have a section set up that we can run at highway speeds. They've got an intersection that we can turn on or off as we need to, and so we have organized. I've gone out and gotten local first responders, both fire, ambulance, gotten highway patrol out there, and we've got some great. So we go out and we'll spend days out there at the track, just having people. We're going to operate. Not just are we getting stopped, but how to react to an emergency vehicle that already has someone stopped on the brake line lane, right, on the emergency lane. We've got the slow down or move over rule in Texas. Absolutely, our truck is going to comply with that.
Okay.
Right. But even if a first responder is just coming, there's requiring. You're supposed to, even though most people don't.
So if there's an ambulance kind of trying to make its way through, it's going to detect that and know that it needs to slow down, maybe pull over, and let it pass.
Right. Absolutely. So yes,
so
something we spend a lot of time on.
Is that sensors? Is that a LiDAR? Is that radar that detects?
It's a combination. It's the sensor suite, right? We're going to see that. The cameras are going to see that, but also we're going. And particularly when you're talking about flashing lights, that's more of a visual perception thing. But yeah, so they're going to see them, and the sensor suite is going to, in its fullness, is going to see that, okay, this is an emergency vehicle. We're going to have to either slow down, we got to move over, we got to pull over and stop. And we work on those things with our first responder partners.
Okay, so let's say I'm the highway patrol. I'm not. I don't want to pretend like I am, but if hypothetically, I see a truck, it makes some kind of weird motion, driving, whatever, I pull it over, turn on my sirens, I get out, I start walking up to this truck that's pulled over. Is there something presented on the truck that makes me know that it's, before I get all the way up to the cab, that I know it's an autonomous vehicle, like a sign on the back, or am I blind until I get up there and then I realize?
I don't know that anybody that's putting and we've danced this little kind of delicate dance. Initially, when I was still with Highway Patrol, I would get calls from my friends at some of the autonomous vehicle developers where other vehicles and trucks would do things that cut in and slam on their brakes. So the more you do, because they want to see how the autonomous vehicle is going to act, or they want to see if they can cause it to do something, just not very smart, but sometimes people aren't. And so those things happen. And so our truck, they're fairly obvious, particularly, a lot of the trucks, when you look at them, you look at a picture of our trucks, obviously it's all, it's more from the front, but they've got those big sensor racks. They've got all the cameras, and they're fairly obvious that they are. But no, if you for some reason just pulled up behind us and hit your lights just because you wanted to stop us for some reason, you wouldn't necessarily know. What happens when you do stop us, though, is we find a safe spot, we pull over, and we go into what we call a minimal risk condition. That is, our truck takes itself out of autonomy, it sets the brakes, turns on the flashers. on our trucks, and I think this is pretty unique to us. And again, back to that discussion we had earlier about advertising that you're autonomous. We make sure all the first responders in the areas that we're working know that right below, like where our rear view mirror is, on one of the arms that holds our sensors, some LiDAR, some LiDAR units, there is a small blue LED light. If that light is illuminated, we are in autonomous mode. So if you see us driving down the road and that light is illuminated, we're in autonomous mode. If that light goes out, then that vehicle is safe. You can approach it, and that's in our. We have a first responder guide. And again, you send people to our website, bot.auto, click on the safety tab, look at first responder information, and you can look at our first responder guide. That's a living document that we're going to update, because we're talking about putting an intermediate mode to that light potentially. Is, okay, if we're stopped and we're safe, but we can resume operations, maybe we make that a flashing light pattern. So there's things like that. But we're constantly working with our first responders. What do they need to feel comfortable? Because that's very important to us. And so we're constantly kind of reaching out.
So in my hypothetical situation, I'm a highway patrol, stop a truck, it does everything right. I walk up to the cab and I realize, there's a moment when I realize this is an autonomous truck. What does that interaction look like at that point? Let's say, for example, the reason I stopped the truck is because there's been some reports of somebody stole a truck and maybe they're hauling some illegal cargo, and I as the authority or the officer need to look in that truck. What does that look like?
So what it looks like is, again, and this is all covered in our first responder guide. That, again, it's available electronically, but I print those things a couple hundred at a time. Here in town at Company Printing, they do a great job for me, and I hand those out everywhere I go. Here, this is if you see one of our trucks, and what it entails is reaching out to us when we're operating with nobody in there. We will have on the side of our truck a toll-free phone number, 1-800, call BOT. And you can call us, and we will have somebody pick that up and walk you through whatever you need. There's also going to be a QR code on the side of our truck that if you scan it, it will bring up our first responder guide. So you can look at that on the side of the road, and that will have also the numbers in there to get a hold of anybody you need to get a hold of. So it's there. And those, by the way, are things that we've been working on for a long time, but there are also things that this most recent Texas legislative session created some rulemaking authority regarding operating autonomous vehicles in Texas, and gave Texas DMV quite a bit of the majority of the authority to issue authority to operate now autonomously in Texas. You can't just go out and operate autonomously until you've been given till you've been given the go ahead. And there's some requirements with that. You have to go in and certify some things, and you have to that first responder guide has to be submitted to my old friends at Texas DPS, and they have to approve it before Texas DMV will approve your authority to operate.
So I can't next weekend outfit my car and make it autonomous and just
you can. This deals with anything commercial. It deals with my operation. It deals with the robo-taxi operations. But if you go out and buy a car that's, there's several out there, but you go out and buy a full self-driving Tesla, you do not have to register with the state to operate that personally. But if I was going to go buy 5 of those and operate them as a robo-taxi, as an Uber type service or Lyft type service, a ride-sharing service, then I would have to meet the requirements.
But as just an individual, I could do it.
Sure.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Bart Auto, are you operating in a blue ocean right now, like no competition? Or
no. Texas is the absolute epicenter of autonomous freight development. There are 7, I believe, at least 7 freight companies operating here in Texas right now. I mean, Bart Auto, obviously, we're the newest player. I mean, I'm kind of biased. I think we're the best player, but I've got a lot of friends at the other developers too. Kodiak, Aurora, Gatic, Torque, Wabi, Stack AV, Plus AV. Everybody is operating in Texas because this, again, we have the requisite kind of good weather. That don't make it more difficult on yourself while you're building your product, and we have the kind of common sense regulatory scheme here in Texas that allows us to do this without overburdening us. Not every state is like that. Not every state is Texas, right? Some states part of my job, back, we started this with a simple question of what does the director of fleet and operational safety, what's that look like day to day, right? And it's taken us where we are.
Yeah.
But just to kind of bring it back to there, the other part of one of the things I do is I set in a lot of state government relations kind of calls, and we go different places, different states. A bill will pop up that would prohibit autonomous trucking operations, require a driver in an autonomous truck, which obviously kind of probably defeats the purpose of building an autonomous truck if we have to have a driver in there, right? And so so we see what happens in other states, and then we see we realize how fortunate we are to be here in Texas, and that like I said, the governor's office, the state legislature has had the foresight to create this environment to allow us to thrive, and we are thriving, and so hopefully we can export that.
Okay. Is there any restriction on cargo, what you can haul autonomously? So
there isn't currently, like in Texas, there's nothing that explicitly says I can't haul a gasoline tanker,
really?
Right?
Okay.
I can assure you we're not going to do that for a long time, right? I mean, and these timelines are compressed these days with AI, but we're a long way from that, because we're not ready to haul any kind of liquid that has a slot. Well, that's something we're going to have to extensively train our system to when you're talking about hauling liquids, a cargo tank type, a tanker type vehicle. That's a very, very critical skill that the drivers that do that are specially trained for, and God bless them, they do a great job by and large. So just that part of training our system to do that isn't something that we're spending any time on now, because there's plenty of dry van freight, right? We can get all the dry van freight we want. And then the other piece is just the optics right now of, we're still fighting the battle of social acceptance, right? There's still people that don't like what we're doing, don't feel like we should be doing it, right? So
that's true of a lot of new technologies,
right? Absolutely. So for us to come out in public to say, yeah, not only are we doing this, but by the way, we're going to pull 30,000 gallons of gasoline, or 40,000 gallons of gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever.
Somebody joked with me the other day. I think it was Todd Smith. I think you know who Todd is.
Yeah, sure.
We were talking about, how do you know if I'm cruising down the highway in my car and there's a truck next to me, how do I know if it's an autonomous vehicle? I think Todd had joked. He said, well, if you go like this and it doesn't really honk back at you.
We need to train our trucks to do that, right? But maybe someday we will after we work out but that's a great point. If you look up there and there's no one in the driver's seat,
that's a good indication.
It's a good indicator. But again, right now, just about everybody, we've got all those companies that I just listed. There's 7 or 8 of us in here doing this kind of work in Texas, and if you go out and see most of them, they may be operating autonomously, but they may still have that driver there. So just the safety driver until, like I said, so in my years and years of working, in commercial vehicle enforcement with the Highway Patrol, we were very, we were very fortunate to have a great relationship with our trucking association, the Texas Trucking Association, and a lot of great carriers here in Texas and beyond that want to do things right and are transparent, and they're working with us, not against us. And we always talked about kind of being we're sitting on different sides of a fence, but we're running right up that fence row together. We're working in parallel between the trucking association and their great members and the highway patrol doing, and other law enforcement doing what we do. We all want the same thing, and that's, we want freight to move efficiently and safely on our Texas highways and save lives. And so, so having said that, I've had a great relationship with Texas trucking my entire career in the highway patrol, but never, I think I can honestly say that in my last 4 or 5 years dealing with the autonomous folks, I don't know that I've ever dealt with a segment of the industry that is more transparent and more willing to compromise than the autonomous folks. And so, and that's my goal now in my role, is to be, I want to be the most transparent segment of the industry. I don't want my friends at Texas DPS or Texas DMV or my federal friends at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. I don't want them to have to come to us and ask, what are you doing? We try to meet with them regularly. We try to keep them abreast of what's going on. If something's going good, we want to tell them. If something didn't go good, we want them to know. And so, like I said, this segment of our industry is, I just think, doing, bending over backwards to be transparent and to work with our regulatory partners.
So my next question is actually two-part. First part is there an expectation or a goal that autonomous trucking, autonomous vehicles will just kind of take over someday, where there will never be a driver behind a big rig ever?
Well, never's a long time again, but I don't think so. Okay. That's not our goal. So again, we talked about our business model, which is similar to a lot of our competitors, or I say competitors. I like to call them peers. Mm-hmm. We're not really competing in the sense that I need a Kodiak or an Aurora to fail in order for Bot Auto to succeed. Bot Auto is going to succeed on our own merits.
So not a zero-sum game.
It's not a zero-sum game at all. So not so much competitors as our peers, but we're all running kind of that, because it's just it's easier to manage. We're going to run that hub-to-hub or address-to-address model, for our customers, where we're going to go and we're going to, as I described earlier, someone is going to go pick up some freight for us, bring it to a hub. We're going to drive it, say, 1,100 miles to Phoenix or 1,150 miles to Phoenix. We're going to pull into our hub. Someone's going to take that over and deliver it to that final destination. We're always going to need those great drivers to do that, to run those local and regional routes. When you look at trucking, you look at what's going on in trucking right now, there's been a narrative for several years about a shortage of drivers, and we've kind of, that narrative's kind of been refined. It hasn't necessarily been a shortage of drivers, but maybe there's been a shortage of truly qualified drivers. And right now, if you follow the trucking news, the Federal Motor Carrier Administration, under their current administrator, a good friend of mine from the state of Florida, Mr. Derek Bars, they are going after CDL mills, people that are just fraudulently issuing CDLs. They're going after folks that have non-domiciled CDLs within all the states that shouldn't have non-domiciled CDLs. Folks that come over here from other places, and that's very tightly regulated, and it's kind of gotten a little out of control. They're doing a great job of tightening that up. There's been a re-emphasis on rules that have existed for a long time, such as English language proficiency for CDL drivers. So that you have to be able to read and communicate sufficiently in English, that you can understand traffic signs and warnings and communicate with enforcement personnel. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of, it, quite frankly, was probably not enforced a lot of places as strictly as it could have been for a long time. And so FMCSA is doing that. And so these are places where our autonomous vehicles, we don't have that problem, right? And so as we remove some of these unqualified drivers, kind of straining our supply lines, we're going to backfill that void. There's already a void. We don't see a ton of young people going into trucking these days, right? And a lot of them that do want to go into, they want to be home tonight, or they want to be home every other night, or a couple times. And that's what we can give them. We can give you good paying jobs with great benefits working for great companies where you're running local and regional routes, and we're going to handle the boring 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 miles in the middle.
So I mentioned two parts, and before we get into the next part, you said something that triggered another question, and you talked about CDLs. So right now with your current on-the-road vehicles staffed by a safety driver, does that safety driver have to have a CDL?
Absolutely. The safety driver is sitting in the driver's seat, shadowing the wheel, paying. We've specially trained folks. They are logged into the electronic logging device as the driver. I mean, even though the truck is driving, yes. And so when that driver hits his 11th hour of driving or his, 14th hour of being on duty, they're under the same rules as any other truck driver.
Okay. Can they take over the truck?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what they're there for.
Okay.
Is if they see something that's not going right, if we see something that, just isn't, and they're empowered. And it was one of the first policies that I worked on when I came to Bart within our company was that safety driver is the captain of the ship.
Okay.
And if they need to take over, they take it. They don't have to call and ask permission. They don't have to worry about repercussions. Take over, and they could do that in a variety of ways. There's a couple buttons they can push, but steering input by the driver will kill the autonomy.
Okay.
At least until we reactivate it. Tapping the brake or
so
pushing.
Back
the
to
brake.
my question about is there still steering wheels and and pedals? Okay. So the other part of my question from earlier is, you mentioned business model, and you talked about that for a bit. I guess my question is, are you guys a trucking company or a truck company? Meaning, are you just hauling everything with your trucks that you built to be autonomous, or are you leasing, selling these newly outfitted autonomous vehicles to the traditional trucking companies?
And that's a fantastic question, and I mean, seriously, thanks for asking it. So a lot of our peers are technology as a service type companies where they are building a truck and they want to partner with those OEMs and they want to sell, say, they want to sell to large fleets. Okay. You think of any of the large fleets out there, and they want to sell trucks and then service those trucks and run the autonomous service for these large fleets. We're different. We are a transportation as a service company.
Okay.
Our vision at Bot Auto is we want to be the fleet. We want to own 1,000 trucks. We want to own 5,000 trucks. We want to own 10,000 trucks. And we want to partner maybe with those same fleets that our friends are selling trucks to and just pick up excess capacity. I mean, we're working with some of the biggest names in the industry right now, hauling freight for them. We haul daily for Amazon. We've hauled for J.B. Hunt, C.H. Robinson, places like, our friends at Ryan Transportation on our recent, the drive I just described with nobody on board, that delivering freight autonomously for the first time, in history, we believe, was, that was set up by our friends at Ryan Transportation. And so we've got these great partners, but that is our business model.
Okay.
We're not looking to sell trucks. We think it's a simpler business model. We think it simplifies. So once you sell your technology to someone and, ultimately, we live in an imperfect world. One of these trucks is going to have a crash, and there's going to be questions of liability, right? Who is liable? Is it the owner? That is, if I sell this to Gaiman Chaka Trucking and you buy 5 of my autonomous trucks and one of them gets in a wreck, are you responsible? Is Bart Teeter autonomous driving system that I put on your truck and sold to you, am I responsible? We feel like by being both the developer and the carrier, that it simplifies a lot of that for our customers.
Good points. Yeah.
And we can just it's us, and we deal with that with our insurance folks and our brokers and underwriters.
That's a good segue into. I mean, you talked about liability. When you talk about insurance, how does that impact? How does that play into the fact that now there's autonomous vehicles? Does that raise your rates? Does that decrease? Rates?
We are paying right now. We're comparable. I mean, right with normal insurance rates for a for
so
freight
not really
operations.
changing.
And I think that's changed over the years. Like we deal, we have a public partnership, on our insurance that we announced with Marsh, who's our insurance provider, and we announced that last year. And it's interesting. Every year we renew, and I'm involved in the conversations where we sit down with the underwriters, not just the brokers or the agent. We sit down with the underwriters and we talk, and it's they're asking such good questions now. They're asking questions about our safety case, and they're asking questions about our operations, and they're making those determinations based on that information. And again, we're paying what another comparable trucking company of our size and experience level are paying.
So on that same train of thought, now that you've got technology built in, and I'm assuming they communicate back to a home base somewhere, is there any thoughts or considerations or requirements to carry something like cybersecurity type insurance?
Cybersecurity is something we talk about a lot, and I've got a great partner at Bart Auto. His name's Andy Burnett. Andy lives in Northern California, and he comes in and he is our cyber guy. I mean, but we see, again, our peers and bringing people in.
Well, more so the question is about, and I'm sorry to interrupt your train there. Is there a requirement to carry cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah. I mean, there is. We do that. We carry that, as along with our general liability, product liability, cargo coverage. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So now, kind of turning the bend here a little bit. You started talking about cybersecurity and employing staff and people. I would imagine, you typically hear when there's conversations about autonomy and robotics and all kinds of new things, and people say, well, it's replacing human jobs. There's concern about replacing all the drivers. But I also hear, and I convey to people sometimes, that things just change, and then new jobs, new careers get developed. What do you see? What's happening now? What kind of new roles exist in a trucking company beyond just drivers and logistics coordinators?
And another great question, and that is that you're right, spot on with your assessment of it. Is yes, we already talked about still needing drivers, right? Mm-hmm. We're not putting drivers out of business. We still need great drivers, but we're creating technician jobs and inspector jobs. Like we are working closely. I've worked closely. There's an organization called the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and we've developed. I talked about kind of some of the enhanced inspections we do on autonomous trucks before we launch them autonomously. That is a extremely thorough inspection, and we're going to do that before we launch autonomously. And if we find anything wrong, and I'm talking about minor lighting, like a side marker or a clearance lamp is out, we're not going to launch till we fix it. It is a zero defect standard before we launch a truck autonomously. That way, it's designed to give our enforcement partners that confidence that our trucks are mechanically more sound, cleaner, better maintained than any truck on the road. And so we have to hire those people. We need technicians to install, to repair, to help build our systems, right? So we are creating those jobs, and those jobs are paying what driver jobs pay, right? And so, it's funny, I've got drivers with 30 years on that love coming. Yeah. They're just so excited to be working in this space right now, and I've talked to some of them, and they're excited about the potential to maybe I won't always, I love driving truck, but man, I'm not as young as I used to be. Maybe I take some of these other jobs and I supervise some of these technicians, or I supervise some of our inspectors that we're using to make sure our fleets are maintained. We talked about, at some point we got to fuel these trucks up, and we may have to do that. We're going to have to hire people someplace to do that and to service things on the fly.
So one thing I just comes to top of mind is, roadside assistance. The typical, something breaks, send out a guy, right, to fix, do whatever. But what happens when a technical component breaks? One of those server racks you got in the truck breaks down halfway between destinations.
So the good news is if one server rack, one of our servers quits, the other one is already working.
So they're redundant.
They're redundant.
Okay.
Yeah. The other one, like if it's a power issue, this one's powered differently. If it's a GPU issue, this one's different. Okay. And so if this one quits, we still have one. We only, one can do it, but we do two. So we have that redundancy built in. But now what happens is we're immediately, like I said, we're not sending these out without keeping an eye on them. So we're immediately going to know that. So we don't want to work with one because now we've lost our redundancy. So if we lose this one, now we've got a problem, right? And so what's going to happen is we're going to pull that over. And ultimately we're going to, probably just, wherever that truck is sitting in the world, we're gonna call a wrecker service and say, come get us, and we're gonna send. If it's not somewhere where we have people, we're gonna send people, and that may take us.
So you're just gonna pick up the truck and haul it somewhere to be fixed, as opposed to send in a technician that might just be able to fix it.
It depends where we're at.
Okay.
If we're close enough, like obviously on a 230-mile Dallas to Houston run, we can be there pretty quickly, right? Depending on where it breaks down. We've got people in Dallas, we've got people mostly in Houston, but we can. But if I'm running a route from Houston to Phoenix and I break down in Deming, Arizona, or New Mexico, I may not have a facility there. Okay. So it may just be, and that was, honestly, Gabe, that was one of the questions that we get all the time. As I travel around talking to various people and first responders, and like, well, what if the computer quits and it stops? One of the questions we would get as we talk to first responders and others is, well, what if the computer quits and the truck breaks down? Well, our trucks are designed, if anything goes wrong, at the first sign of trouble, to pull over, find a safe spot and park. But even if it breaks down, they're like, well, what if it breaks down in a traffic lane? Trucks break down every day in traffic lanes, right? Not because of necessarily computers, but because they drop a drivetrain or they blow a gasket. Whatever happens, they break down. At that point, I always like to point out that this isn't necessarily an autonomous vehicle problem. This is just a traffic management problem. Okay. So for my first responders, I tell them all the time, treat it like you would any other truck. If you need to, we give you the instructions on how to tow it. If you need additional instructions, there's really no. It's a Freightliner and a trailer. There's call a heavy duty wrecker and tow us, and we're happy to pay the wrecker bill, and then we'll send somebody to fix what was broken, and we'll get back on the road. And so, but yeah, that redundancy is important to us. But just being able to assure those folks that if we break down, treat us like you treat anybody else.
How do you monitor the trucks remotely? Is it satellite, cellular?
It's predominantly cellular, and redundancy, multiple carriers, boosters, cell boosters, all that stuff, so that we have the best coverage possible. We're working. We've looked at Starlink and satellite type stuff, because obviously, if we can get that, if that's more reliable, then that's the route we're going to want to go. We want to be as reliable as we can be, because we want to be able to monitor those in real time.
Okay. So you mentioned early on that nobody's remote controlling the truck. So
correct.
Even if you lost sight of it because the cell signal went out, maybe satellite or whatever you're using at the time, you go blind, that truck is still going to operate.
The truck is everything the truck needs to operate is on the truck.
Okay. It's still going to end up at its destination.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we're working very hard to regain our eyes on that truck and figure out what's going on. But yes, the truck doesn't need anything external.
That's good.
Right.
Makes me feel comfortable.
That's key, right?
Yeah. Well, Bart, I think we're right at almost an hour. That was very interesting. Dive into the trucking world, the autonomous trucking world. So remind me, you've been with this company for a couple of years, right?
About a year and a half.
Okay. And you see yourself staying in this role for
I do. I see myself staying at this company. I mean, I think we've got a great thing going. I talked about our fully autonomous run just about a month ago, where we delivered freight with no human interaction. We're going to continue to do that. Just stay tuned. We want to ramp up our schedule of doing that, so that we're doing that on a ultimately weekly and moving to a daily basis. It's going to take us a while, baby steps, but yeah. And so I just think we're doing great things here at Bart Auto and in this industry in general. So I'm excited to.
Is there anything new as we kind of wrap up? Is there anything new on the horizon for Bart Auto? Maybe that you can share.
Again, I would just say watch us. We're going to, what we did is not a one-off thing. That's going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to try to do that on more routes. But there's nothing, nothing shocking out there that, anybody would be surprised by. That's what we're designed to do, is build trucks that drive themselves, and that's what we're doing.
See where we land with it.
Yeah, like I said, just get on there. If you want to see more, check us out at bot.auto, and that'll, that tells the story, or lots of stuff on YouTube, Bot Auto, and see what we're doing. It's amazing stuff.
For sure. Thank you so much.
All right.